And I want to just take a second to introduce our moderator tonight, Charlie Kearns, to my right. Charlie, he'll tell you he's in his third phase of his career. His first phase was in healthcare. His second phase was taking that healthcare knowledge into a consulting role. And then his third phase is teaching and working in an area that he has called the intersection of happiness, performance, and well-being. And it has a lot of publications that you can see from the Pepperdine website. And let me go ahead and introduce Dr. Charlie Kearns.
All right. Well, wasn't that inspirational to see an 87-year-old man get up there in front of us like that, and all inspiring. And we're going to continue with that momentum now, and we're really fortunate this evening to have a distinguished panel. And I'd like to take very briefly, because we could spend several hours going over their credentials and so forth, but I want to just, maybe they can stand up as I introduce them, and we're going to go right across here. We'll start with Michael, and then what's going to happen is they have entertained a few questions, one in particular I'll introduce, but also we don't want to be bound by that. We're going to ask if they have some they'd like to react to what Mr. Murdock has shared with us. And if there's time, and there may be, but we want to keep this crispy and crunchy tonight. If there's time, then we will also maybe we can take a question or two from the audience. But we did start a little past 7, but we will honor our commitment. We'll keep this we'll focus on bringing it home about 8:15 or a little before. So if you're planning on, for the time purposes, we'll stop somewhere between 8 and 8:15. So with that in mind, let me introduce Michael Baldridge. And Michael comes to us, he's the Senior Director, and he's responsible for global marketing and planning research at the Baxter Bioscience. And he has over 25 years of experience in the healthcare area, and he actually has his MBA from Pepperdine. So, and moving right along, we have Marta Newhart, and Marta is the Vice President and in charge of communications and public affairs and communication for about everything you can name, and that will take us a while, at Covidien. And she also has her bachelor's degree in international communications and in international business from the University of Washington. And she is one of the privileged few that have received a MBA from our key presidential program. We call it PKE, Presidential Key Executive Program. And so we're very pleased to have Marta with us. And moving right along down our distinguished boulevard this evening, we have Brennan, and he is coming to us from Amgen tonight. And Brendan Tien has received his MBA from Carnegie Mellon in 1994, and I want to give you that date because ever since that time, he's been involved in biotechnology at the cutting edge of biotechnology at Amgen, where he's the executive director for oncology marketing in the oncology business unit. So thank you so much for joining us. And Steve Leatherman is the president of Sandell Medical Industries. And he too has 25 years of progressive executive experience in the healthcare area. And this ranges from the Fortune 500 companies to successful startups. And he brings all of our panels to collectively bring so much experience, and I think we're very fortunate for them to take their time out of their busy schedules and to be with us tonight, and we really appreciate it. So what we're going to do now is have each of the panelists, and we'll we'll start with whomever would like to start with. And here's what we're going to do. We asked the panelists to consider a bunch of questions, and we have Steve to thank for that. Thank you, Steve, for generating lots of questions. But we also want to keep this organic and flowing and not get stuck on just a series of questions. So we do have one question to start with, and I'm going to read that question to you. But I'm also, based upon Mr. Murdock's comments, asked the panelists to comment if they'd like to. So it's an and/or. We may hear from the following question from each of them, or they may choose to talk about any reactions they had to Mr. Murdock, or they may do both. So here's the question. We asked them to briefly indicate, independent of cost, put cost aside, what is your firm doing to improve patient outcomes and safety? So that was the question. And please, we want to hear from each panelist. We'll see where that takes us, and then we'll proceed.
Well, I just wanted to comment for a minute on the inspiration from Mr. Murdock. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was sure inspired to go out and have a salad for supper. My husband wanted to go have a steak, but I think we're going to do something different. I think it sort of goes without saying, but one person asked about education in the audience, and I think that's really important. I wish he would have spoken about that a little bit more, because we all know, because we are all either alumni or somehow associated with higher education, so we understand the power of it. But what's being done at the educational or the elementary level is really where it's got to start. And so I wish he would have spoken about that a little more, and maybe that's another panel, but I just wanted to throw that out there. In getting to the question that Charlie asked about what are we doing aside from cost to improve patient outcomes, it's really important to work very closely with the clinical professionals to understand root cause of the disease states. So my company, what we do is we build surgical devices. We also do different types of pain management, medications. We do everything from sutures to staples to pads and pencils and everything in between. Our company's pretty big. It's probably the biggest unknown company you've ever heard of. We have 44,000 employees. I was telling Charlie that earlier, and he said, what? You know, you don't really think of us that much, and that's not a bad thing. But what we try to do, and I don't mean to sound trite, but it is so important, is to really work with clinicians to understand root cause of disease state. Because if you don't really understand that, how do you know what you're developing is really going to do for the patient what's important? And so I would just answer the question that way.
Well, let's move right along, and who would like to react to the presentation or address the question?
Happy to do that. First, thanks everybody for your time. I know you could have been anywhere else today, so we really appreciate you spending some time with us along the way. The one thing I took away from Mr. Murdock's presentation is a maniacal focus on one objective and one priority. And that's clear. The man has dedicated the last 25 years of his life to eating healthy and convincing others of the need to do similarly. I think that's probably a great way to think about addressing any problem. And as I was kind of sitting there listening to him, it reminds me a little bit about 25 years ago what Amgen started doing. I've worked for other companies. I worked for Johnson & Johnson before working at Amgen. They're both great companies. The reason I ended up at Amgen is because they're maniacally focused on grievous illness, and as Marta pointed out, really understanding the underlying root cause and trying to address those needs. But the question was very specific about what you're doing regardless of cost to make sure that you're improving patient outcomes. I think there's one really good. It's not just an Amgen related focus. I think a lot of companies are doing this, but I'll give you. And that's defining or understanding tests and tests that will help you understand if somebody is going to respond to a particular form of therapy. So Amgen has a product called Vectibix for colon cancer patients. And recently, we discovered that there's a test that can be done to determine whether or not you're likely to respond to that therapy. That was after the drug was already on the market, so Amgen didn't know the answer to that question. And you can think of it as anybody with colon cancer that had failed other therapies would have been eligible for this drug. But about, honestly, I don't know what the percentage is, but a number of patients would not respond if they did not have this wild type gene. So the researchers were able to discover that and were able to make sure that only appropriate patients are treated. So today, physicians know that if this test comes back negative, that you wouldn't even try this drug on someone. On the other hand, it means that the patients that are going to be treated are more likely to respond. So it's another positive way to look at applying science to make sure we're improving patient outcomes.
Thank you. I'm honored that I got invited to speak tonight. Several of you have seen some other conferences I spoke at. First, I'll talk about our keynote speaker. It was very inspiring. I actually came here tonight, so I'm away from my wife, but I felt like she was in the room and told me to eat my vegetables. It's either her or my mother, so. So it's true, and I was listening to what he's saying, and it was a little bit humorous in the way he was saying it. But it reminded me of the way that we deal with our patients, because one of the biggest issues that we find with our patients, a lot of the patients that we deal with Baxter have genetic diseases, and it's critical that they take their medicines as a compliance issue. So they're not going to get really good outcomes unless we find that the patients are compliant. So there's a number of different things that we do to help them become compliant. Some of it is educational, some of it is with their peers, other people who have similar conditions. Some of it is to take our drugs it's very inconvenient to do that, so we spend a lot of time working on ways to make our drugs easier to inject. And also, one of our diseases that we deal with is the hemophilia associated bleeding disorder. You have to inject the drug, so the mix of needles and people who can't stop bleeding could be a potential for disaster. So we work on devices that are needleless devices to help them. So for patient compliance and safety, there's a lot of different ways that you can look at this, but those are just some of the things that Baxter's doing.
Thank you. Michael, Steve.
I sort of had a different take as I was listening about all the fruit and vegetables I was supposed to eat, and I was really glad that one of my choices is the fruits that are fermented. So I was waiting for him to comment on the end of my Harley ride if I was supposed to ask some of my buddies if, which of the mixed vegetables are we going to puree. Somehow didn't seem to fit well. It's sort of an interesting question for our company. What do we do to improve patient outcomes and safety? Our company does nothing but patient and healthcare safety products. So we do nothing but safety products that either work on staff members, prevent safety issues, or for the patient themselves. It'd be sort of interesting for some of you may have not known, there's a landmark study that was done several years ago called Two Errors Human. Anybody ever heard of it, Two Errors Human? Basically, it was said, and now the figures have actually doubled since then, about 200,000 people in the United States die annually due to preventable errors in hospitals. I think some of you have heard of Dennis Quaid's twins. Last month, there was a surgeon in Rhode Island who operated on the wrong side of the brain. I could go, that was the third incident, by the way, not that particular procedure, at that same facility. So what we do is we actually have 4 or 5 different categories that actually all have some kind of regulatory, legislative, or preventable action that says, look, you want billions of dollars for health care? We should talk maybe to DC about this. We'll do real easy. Prevent safety issues in your hospital system, because it's costing you trillions of dollars as a taxpayer. They're all preventable. And it's amazing when you look at the systems, what happens. Maybe down, as we get farther down, we'll talk about a couple of examples. It's a little scary about how hospitals and others sort of ignored it because of maybe, we'll see, financial people, but because of budgets, et cetera, et cetera. So it was interesting from our perspective because that's all our company does. That is our mission.
Thanks, Steve. Let's, another question I'd like to ask for each of the panelists, a different question for each of you. And we'll start with Michael. And let me put the question out there, and then we'll have your pleasure of response. So the question for Michael is, we look at this, how important is international growth to your business today? And how might it change due to healthcare legislation?
International growth is very important to Baxter, but Baxter is actually a very international company already. We sell our drugs and services throughout the world as it is right now, but from the perspective of growing economies outside of the world, it's very interesting that we're able to go there and help patients that haven't been able to have access to some of the treatments they've had before. So I'll give you a real-life example. One of the ways that our patients are identified in Brazil is their parents get arrested. It seems kind of weird, but what happens is in Brazil they have a law that says teachers have to report children who have bruises if they come to school with bruises, and then the parents get arrested for beating children. And a lot of our patients are hemophilia patients, and they have bruises just because of the disease that they have. Parents don't know they have the disease. So the mere fact that we can go into these countries and educate the countries that there are treatments for diseases that in many cases not making sure that they actually have is very desirable for our company from expanding our services perspective, but it's also very rewarding for being able to work in that company because we can actually bring healthcare to countries where they don't actually have access to it. Another thing that we do, a lot of what I'll call intercontinental or developing countries around the world, is they don't have access to what we have, which is known as recombinant technology. So that's, Amgen also has recombinant technology also. So the way that a lot of patients are treated with some of the diseases that we treat are, they're treated with blood donations from other people. And there's a lot of diseases that can get transmitted with blood. So the products that we make here, actually right down the street in Thousand Oaks, we make them synthetically, and then we can bring those products over to areas of the world where they're currently treating them with very unsafe methods, and we give them the chance to give them really a normal life because they have a very safe product that they can work with.
Let's do this. If someone has a question for Michael, now you could, why don't you stand up and tell us your affiliation, your name and your affiliation, and if not, then we'll keep going and we'll have an opportunity shortly to throw it completely open to the audience and see what comes of that. So does anyone have a question for Michael at this point? Michael? Okay, well, let's...
Thank you.
That's fine. We'll keep doing this because we'd like to have an exchange from the audience as we go forward. So I'm going to ask Marta a question, and that is, what's your organization doing to procure international business, and where are the opportunities for your U.S.-based firms to develop international customers?
Well, about 40% of our sales come from outside the U.S. And so we were a little slow to figure out that if you really want to be global, it's much more than talking about it. And it's much more than a couple of trips to China or to the south of France or wherever it is your business is a couple of times a year. What you have to do is set up facilities there. You actually have to hire local people. You have to work with local hospitals, local clinicians, and you have to do that whole value stream in country. And now that we're doing that, a large percentage of our international employees are not expats, they're actual local employees in about 59 countries. It's quite a few. And what we've noticed is the supply chain can come from local suppliers. The quality and the sustainability can be just as good as the U.S. if you work with those suppliers locally. So we've had a lot of success in the last couple of years expanding into international markets and being more of a true global company. Some of the other things that we're doing is really looking at how we can reduce the time that a patient is in the OR, and really talking with some of these international hospitals and international clinicians about what can we do to shorten that amount of time, because that also, to your first question, Charlie, reduces or is part and parcel to better patient outcomes. And we find that the more we work with them and the more we take on that educational, that professional educational role with them, that they are able to come up with new and innovative ways to do that. And then we turn around and try to produce products that fit that. So some of the needs internationally just don't mirror the needs in the US. You have different disease states in different countries. You have different lifestyles in different countries. So it's been very telling to us what is needed in different countries. It's just not one global size fits all.
So, any questions for Marta at this point? Anyone have a question? Yes. Please stand up.
Sure. Tim Shumbar from the GAN Council and Northrop Grumman employee. With competitors at the table, I want to be careful how I pose a question. With the talk of international sales and working into some of those markets, does some of the current regulation coming out of Washington broaden your pie's proportion to work more in international versus some of the things that happen in the U.S.?
I can start with that. A lot of what's going to affect the medical device industry doesn't happen right away. And so a lot of that happens in a few years to come. I think it's 2013 is when the medical device tax is implemented. It really, for us, it gets down to what are the different needs from the different countries. You know, surprisingly, in the U.S., we do a lot more laparoscopic surgeries than opens. In France, that's not the case. And so we have a whole different market there. And some of these international countries have their own regulations. We have very strict regulations that we have to follow in South America, mainly in Mexico and some of the surrounding countries, that make it really difficult and costly to operate there.
That's a great point. I think most people don't recognize that there's other regulations still once you get out of the U.S.
There really are.
Very complicated. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on and move down. I want to have another question here for Brendan. And here's the question. Before I pose the question, you know, we often in business school, we can do lots of different assessments of folks and their management and leadership skills. And one of the things often that people will come up and they'll say that they're visionary. So do we have folks here, anybody would raise their hand and say they tend to kind of look out at the future more than kind of drill down on the present? Do we have any visionaries in the group that are willing to admit it? Okay, a few hands went up. So this question is right up your alley. So here's the question. Here's the question. I didn't raise my hand. And so, here's the question. Looking ahead 12 months, how different might your business be compared to today?
Yeah, I don't know that necessarily takes a visionary. I think healthcare reform is definitely going to have an impact on the way we do business moving forward. I think most companies have been thinking that we've been headed in this direction anyway, so I think there has been preparation already for that. Amgen's a company that started almost entirely U.S.-based with lots of partnerships outside the United States, but there's been a focus on international expansion, especially over the last decade. Probably that's been accelerated over the last 3 to 5 years. But I think there's just a focus on making sure that therapies are available in countries where up to now we've had very little presence. So even amazingly successful and life-altering drugs that have been made available in Western Europe and in the United States are now being looked at for the Far East and also for South America, for example. So we're definitely looking at places that we haven't been before and expanding our business. I think that's definitely the case.
There's also a focus on making sure that you're containing costs, controllable costs, obviously, and we're also launching a new product. So I think we're going into an entirely new therapeutic area, but staying kind of true to the original focus for Amgen, which is we think long-term success is going to be where there is grievous illness and unmet medical needs. So I don't think Amgen's ever really been focused on Me Too types of therapies, and there are plenty of things that our research projects that never make it far beyond the bench. But when we think we've identified something that is novel and different, it's pursued with a vengeance, and it's pursued internationally. So if you read about us, I think that's what you're going to tend to see is there's something new coming from Amgen, something that's not like what you've seen before. And that's going to happen again really soon.
Question. Anybody have a question? Well,
I have a comment on that,
a comment.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
There's pluses and minuses to going intercontinental. So Brendan talked about some of the great things that are going on, but there's also other issues that we run into, not yet for Baxter, but we track them, so in case it happens to us, we're ready. An example is you have a couple of countries like Brazil and I believe it's Singapore, who's decided that it's okay for them under treaties that they have to violate patent laws and produce their own drugs for the sake of their population. And that's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So, and other things that are going on is India's becoming a little bit of a powerhouse for drug manufacturing, and so is China. There's not really for Amgen and ourselves, there's not really a strong pathway yet for biosimilars, but that's something that we look at on the horizon also. So the United States won't forever and a day be the powerhouse of pharmaceuticals, and neither will Europe. We're seeing India and Brazil starting to come up in the world and become competitors to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say targeted international expansion, because there are certain places that you just can't, at this point, take the risk to go.
Anyone else have a question?
Actually,
Yes.
I have a question. Hi. Olga Galliska, faculty, Pepperdine faculty. Question is, maybe compare drug devices versus medical devices. We're talking about intellectual property issues going into foreign markets. Does the same problem affect medical device manufacturers?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw me, I was nodding my head because I was thinking, yeah, that
I
does.
forgot my glasses, I'm sorry.
What's that?
I forgot my glasses.
It's me, I'm It really does. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a device or drug treatments or it's all going to be treated the same way. And we all have very similar issues. Once getting into the foreign markets, setting up operations in the foreign markets, having other companies take technology and replicate it. We have a product called Ligasure, and it's actually a device that cuts tissue. We found in a couple of Asian markets a product that's just popped up called Ligaseal, and it surprisingly looks just like our device. We're going to encounter that, and you know, there's things that we need to work on to help mitigate that. But you're going to encounter that. I think we talked a lot about India and China and Brazil. I think those are issues everyone here on the panel is facing. Good question.
And can I have a follow-up question to that? With the health reform coming out, do you see any impairment in your margins going forward and for the U.S. part of the business? How is it going to affect your top line and margins?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there are some absolute yeses that you can give, because the legislation is mandating steeper discounts for particular segments of the healthcare market. So if you're already selling a product that is used in a Medicaid population, if you're selling therapies that are used in specific cancer hospitals, there have been mandates for steeper discounts in those to those patient populations. So you can just look at products that are used, several of which are Amgen's products, that are used in those market segments, and you know that there are going to be tighter margins, which is why you have to
be looking to control costs, but also make sure, as a function of healthcare reform, they're trying to get more patients treated. So underinsured and uninsured patients will be entering the healthcare system in ways that they haven't even existed as an addressable population over the past several decades. So between now and 2018, we're expected to see an influx of new patients. We have to prepare for that as well, because that's certainly an opportunity to treat people who have not been treated thus far. But short term, 2011, 2012, Amgen will not be the only company and has already announced that margins will be impacted as a function of the decisions that were made.
I'd like to comment a little further on that. I think everyone will share. I think the real reality is we all want to know who's going to pay for this. And it's an easy to take a big shot at a big pharma company or whomever and say, well, I'm sorry, 6% increase is no longer tolerable. I think 3 sounds really good. Don't you? The real reality is, if you look at the organizations and where distribution organizations are structured, and we talk about the big buying groups, and the IDNs within them, and the hospital within them. I encountered this last week, a group which is 43 hospitals. They're part of a major purchasing group who said, oh, by the way, we've seen the legislation, we'd like you guys all to make a 5% cut. Within that group, there's another buying group that's within the group who said, oh, by the way, we represent the smaller group within the group. Now, there's a called the core group of the major purchasing group within the group that says, I know you have a contract, but we'd like to renegotiate our contract within that because we're really worried about the legislation. One of the things we look at, we're a safety company, is, I got news for you. The guys next door, there happens to be a hospital CEO over there, they waste more money within the existing process that if you can clean that up, margins is not an issue. And whether it's a safety-related issue or whether it's how you function within a facility, where Baxter does a tremendous job at providing ways to control waste in how they deliver things. And these are things we as a company will have to very aggressively take stands on to say, look, there's other ways to help make this, protect margins simultaneously, and positively move forward. But it's a big picture, and I'll tell you, one of the other questions coming down, if that pops up, it's relevant to this. Everyone's being impacted, but in events, everyone has the same story. I think they all read the same newspaper, and I get 15 calls a day, look through all this going, so here's what we would like you to do in advance of what's coming.
So, Steve, you strike me as an executive that's ready for a challenge. And we're going to challenge you here with a question, but before I ask you the question, I wanted to say that when I was asked to help be one of the moderators, what caught my attention in the brochure, Steve called me, were the 3 metrics I'm interested in: outcomes, and patient outcomes, patient affordability, and corporate profitability were 3 of the keys that were highlighted in the brochure. So here's the challenge. Steve, from your perspective, what are the implications for patient outcome and safety, patient affordability, and corporate profitability based on the recent health care legislation from your perspective?
I think patient outcomes will be directly related to how hospitals make a decision strategically how they're going to handle what's coming in. And that will be the first one, of course. Most hospital administrators and systems look around and go, you know, we figure we're going to take a 7% hit in revenues, et cetera, therefore we're going to save by doing the following. Guess what? Every one of those has a patient outcome. Okay. Those are not anything that's proactive, forward thinking. Those are all reactive strategies. And believe me, they're currently in place and have been. If you don't think so, go down to Cedars-Sinai or go down to UCLA, go to big institutions and ask them who's running the show. They'll all raise their hand to the finance department instead of there. It's a start the activities. Okay, I think that's one up front. Affordability is a relative term, I believe. I was asked the other day if we're heading towards socialized medicine and some kind of national program. I said, well, I always thought we had it. It's called Medicare and Medicaid. It's just discussion of how much comes under that umbrella. And we don't deal with that on a routine basis. I think for us as providers, we all have to be a little quicker, a little faster, a little more nimble than the past. Of all of our manufacturing partners, suppliers, et cetera, I think we have, in the last 18 months, set up 65% of them that now have a secondary, tertiary source. In case this goes south, that goes right, this goes left, I can flick a switch and drop the cost of goods to help offset and protect ourselves. So I think that's a part of it. The burden is on us to make sure that we're smarter in how we do business. On the other hand, I spend a lot of time educating hospitals and CEOs of why is it okay for your hospital nurse to be retired because she has a back injury, or because she got AIDS because you were unwilling to use a safety scalpel in the OR. Oh, that's right, it costs $3. On the other hand, if you add it up, a lawsuit, the replacement of everything else was over $1 million. So I think a part of this is how hospitals approach it. You've got to take a bigger picture, step back and say, let's look at the current system and how do we reprocess it strategically. And then I think the rest of us have a good fighting chance of moving forward in a positive fashion.
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
Okay. Just 2 points. You mentioned reactiveness, and Martha, you were talking about working with clinicians earlier to identify root causes. I think the take-home message from this evening is that it's about being knowledgeable and using that knowledge to manage your health and take care of your body, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the biggest issues I think that exists in our healthcare industry that I also, at the same time, is now, I think, is being addressed with, the upcoming wireless technology and moving healthcare towards that, is there seems to be little effort in taking proactive measures. So my question is, then to what extent are each of your companies focusing efforts on preventative type initiatives versus reactive type initiatives? I mean, obviously there's lots of treatments, devices, therapies out there to address issues now, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of focus on proactive measures.
Okay. You would like to address that?
I'll address it, but it's, I'm going to give you even a more complex answer than you asked for, so. Because it's a complex issue. So for example, we are very happy with the healthcare changes that are coming because more people will be on our drugs. But the other thing is it gives us a chance to go forth and say, we would rather have our patients on our drugs prophylactically because it will prevent bad things that happen in the future. A perfect example is if you're not on our leading drugs prophylactically on a regular basis, what happens is over a period of 10 or 15 or 20 years, you develop damaged joints. And then what happens is you have to go in and get a hip replacement, knee replacement, elbow replacement. So I'm not saying that insurance companies are bad, but just like our keynote speaker said, knowledge is power. They have to be able to, we have to bring people on board that can help us explain to the insurance company it costs X dollars to put them on this drug on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And while it seems like it's an upfront cost, what it's going to save you over the long run is replacing hips, knees, and joints. Yeah. Stuff like that. So we're not very good about explaining that, and hospitals are not very good about listening to it. The other thing is, another example from our business is, and I spend a lot of time in hospitals, you probably spend a lot more, but hospitals are run by the finance department, and they tend to delegate the financial decisions to a nurse in an operating room. Your job is to make sure we reduce the amount of spend that we have in this operating room. So a nurse will choose a $50 suture or a staple or a $400 surgical glue. But what happens is 10 years later when that patient comes back for another operation, all of their internal organs are glued together because we didn't use a glue that kept, or we didn't use a anti-adhesion thing that keeps them all apart. So while they save $400 now, it's actually going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars in the future. So the healthcare system, I think the gauntlet has been thrown down, and the effort that the government is doing is to say, okay, drug companies and hospital providers, you cut 5%, 10% here, and what will eventually happen, in my view, is we'll push back and say, that's the wrong way to manage this. We can't cut to save anything. We have to actually be more intelligent about how we do this stuff and make decisions on spend little now, save money later. That answers your question.
Do others?
Yeah, just to add to that, if you think about the cost of surgical site infections, it's about $25,000 per patient. And so to Michael's point, how that care is provided in the OR and follow-up is really important. Just another statistic for you, it's $1,000 per unit of blood for a blood transfusion. These things add up. When you're talking about, what, 200 million people in the United States, you know, these are the kinds of things that really add up.
Yeah, I think to add another part of that, we talked about the proactive. I'll give you an interesting example about the OR and the surgery. This is an actually state of California fine. It's done by OSHA to a hospital somewhere in the city. What it was caused by was a bloodborne pathogen issue. They came in, investigated, OSHA investigated, and said, okay, you've caused this, there's a severe incidence here. So the person walked by the OR and said, by the way, do you use some kind of safety device to prevent these injuries? Proactive. They said, yeah, we tried it. Surgeons didn't like it. The investigator said, no, I don't think you heard. The law says you're supposed to institute and utilize these. Yeah, we tried them. There's a box on the shelf. They said, thank you. That's $8,400, $8,430. I come back the next time and find $70,000, which they immediately called us and said, well, by the way, you have something safety related. Can we talk to you? So I went and visited the CEO. Here's the real kicker. I said, I don't buy it. $8,000 in fines, chump change. Okay, the revenue you do around here is close to $1 billion. This is chump change. What's going on? I said, oh, it's easy. I said, walk out in the hall. I said, see that pink thing? That's an OSHA violation. We have a severe OSHA violation in this hospital. They're posted all over my hospital. Do you know what that's worth to me? A negative publicity. So folks, I got news for you. It had nothing to do about protecting the safety of the nurses, the staff, the potential HIV, HEP, etc. It was about the fact that, whoa, we have a hospital across the way that could have a negative impact on my patients coming in, my beds, etc. Those are the kind of things that have to change.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left. The curtain is coming down, but it's not down yet. So I'd like to look out at the audience here and ask if anyone else has another question or comment. Yes.
In another industry, consumer products, with Procter & Gamble being an example, collaborative innovation is looming large. Are there examples in biotechnology or pharmaceutical industries of companies reaching out to suppliers, clients, patients, customers, physicians, research organizations, consultants, or other external groups to the company itself to facilitate innovation?
Would someone like to address that?
Yeah, I'm going to take it real quick and turn it over to the big guys. If you go out to our website, you can log on to submit your idea for us to create a solution to your problem. Okay? We actually pay people if that becomes a product. We pay royalties on that. If it's patentable, we actually pay them for the life of the patent. And I think there's now to date about 4,500 ideas submitted from healthcare people. I think there's great ways of doing it, where you can actually actively go out and say, do you have a healthcare problem? How do we solve it? For the bigger companies, I know they live this way. So I'll turn it over to them. They have the choice.
Yes.
I just have an example that I think is starting to become a norm, and I think it's actually part of healthcare reform's mission to try and provide the appropriate types of interventions for improving patient outcomes, but also managing costs. You'll see payers, providers, and companies working on pathways for treating certain diseases and agreeing to what that pathway should look like step by step to try and improve the method of treatment, to make sure that there's commonality to how you're treating patients, and that these are evidence-based decisions. So this keeps some of the variability that is maybe more in the area of experimentation and not necessarily in medical fact from taking place. And that provides the payer with a sense of, a real sense of what the costs are and what the appropriate cost should be for managing a particular disease state. The physicians will often agree that that is appropriate, the appropriate way to treat, and obviously companies want to see their therapies used as they're listed in their packages or when they're most effective for patients. So I think that is becoming a standard, and you'll see a lot more of that in the coming years.
Yes. Okay. I'd like to ask each of the panelists if they would, since we're a school of business here, and either out of curiosity or because as healthcare professionals, many of us here in the room may be interested in some career advice. So I have, before we close, and I have Steve come up and close us out, I'd like to ask the following question. There's two questions, and it can be an and/or. Here's the question. As a successful healthcare executive, could you share with us a bullet point or two about a positive impact, something that's had a positive impact on your career to project you to where you are today, or as you leave here and go back tomorrow and look at what's on your plate, and what would you identify as your one or two biggest challenges as an executive in healthcare today? So a bit of career, positive impact, or what is the biggest challenge that you face? We'll hear from each of you and indulge us on this. We appreciate it, and then I'll have a couple more comments to make, and we'll have Steve come up and close us out. Please.
First, I'm fortunate enough to have more than an 8th grade education, but I'm not quite a billionaire yet, so I'm an older guy and have been in business for a long time, so when I went to school to get my MBA, it was almost like they ante you to get into a company. They wouldn't even view you as a business person unless you had an MBA. I know for a fact nowadays that has slightly changed because there's so many people that have gotten MBAs. That's just the ante to get your resume in the door. And I work very closely with Dean Livingstone. I'm actually on the board of visitors at Pepperdine because what I'm trying to feed back to Pepperdine is the reality that when I'm interviewing candidates who have an MBA, what I'm looking for are critical thinking skills. They're MBAs that can read a spreadsheet and tell me what it says or a dime a dozen. So those are like the lower end of the bell curve of the people that come in. The people that come in are not the people that come in and say, hey, I got a diploma that says I got an MBA. The people are the ones that come in and says, I learned this set of tools when I was in a business school, and here's what I can bring to your table. And if you can come into the door and tell me, I looked at your company, I analyzed what your problems are, I see from just looking at your financial statements that you probably have to start growing intercontinentally. Here's how I can help you grow intercontinentally. Those are the type of students that we're looking for.
Thank you.
If you want to be an executive.
Michael, would you pass the baton to Martin? The baton, symbolically?
I think what we all learned tonight is the healthcare industry. If you think this is an industry that can't get better, you're probably in the wrong industry because it can. And through the whole healthcare continuum, to your point, Steve, there's a lot that can be done in the right way and in a collaborative way. I think that nothing's ever easy when you're trying to do what somebody else has tried before and hasn't been successful. And I think at this point in my career, I enjoy being in the healthcare industry because I can see every day how everything, all of the companies in this room and the people in this room collectively do that changes the lives of people. And so, you know, in my 20s, it was all about getting out of school, making money, and getting ahead. And in my 30s, it was about quality of life. And now it's about doing something I get up every day and I feel good about. And that's contributing to people's healthcare.
Thanks. I've skyrocketed to middle management, so take this advice. I love what I do, and I bet everybody at this table feels the same way. I had a chance to speak with Steve about what he does for a living, and it's clear he loves what he does. And I'm absolutely convinced I'm surrounded by smart people in this room. And maybe to Michael's earlier point, there are lots of people that are going to interview for positions. You know, pick something you're really passionate about and walk in there as the person saying, look, this is exactly what I want to do for a living. Let me demonstrate that to you, and you will do outstandingly well. You may not get every job you ever interview for, but I bet you'll be top 2 every time if you've done your homework. The people who show up are like, I just think Amgen's a marvelous company and you're just doing great things. I'm like, yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I'm glad for us too, but why are you the right person to have for yourself? You know, stop and think about what you're interviewing for, and realize that the person sitting across the table from you wants to know that they're not taking a chance in hiring you. They're getting a winner, and they're going to be able to hang their hat on that and say, I've already got somebody who I know is going to do great. I'm just going to help them do that. I guess your other question was, you know, what keeps you up at night? It's hard, you know. What we do every day, we're trying to provide the best health care in the world, and we're also trying to contain costs. I don't know what's more difficult to do than that. Steve?
I'm still looking for middle management.
You're doing it.
You know, I think when people say, you know, how do you pick, where do you go, how do you do it, you know, what makes sense? The one thing I know for sure, and I think everyone up here is the same, I can't think of anything else I'd like to do. And I try not to make statements around financial. People say they could not pay me and I'd still love doing it. Because getting paid is okay too. But the one thing I will tell you, you have to learn to do. And the quicker you do it, and I'm not talking about false humility, I'm talking about you have to surround yourself with people who are brighter than you are. You can't get intimidated by the skill sets of those people around you. And I was very fortunate early in life to realize I'll move up much quicker by surrounding myself with some real bright lights, and then be intelligent enough when to step out of the way, when to utilize them. Doesn't mean you relinquish your leadership role, but you've got to learn how to effectively manage. And I think if you keep that in mind as your pathway, it becomes a lot easier and a lot clearer. Challenges? Jeez, I still got one at home on the 10-year college plan. You know, and schools around here aren't helping me. So payroll free would be great. I'd drive a better car. I think the biggest challenge today is entitlement. And I get taken back when people lost the word respect and how they approach business and their personal ethics. And I used to be, if I gave someone a task, I didn't worry about it. And I really didn't care, be careful here, that you were up to 3 in the morning, because I know you had the personal ethics that if it was due at 8 o'clock, you'd have it. And I didn't have to worry about that. I now have to worry about it these days. And it becomes a whole management seminar for me to know how to manage differently. But I think if you want to help people out that are above you, eliminate that question and how you approach your business life. And believe me, you'll move up much quicker.
Thank you. A final note that I have before Steve will come up and close us out, and it's a note of gratitude. I'd like to thank each of you panelists very much for the wisdom, the poise and professionalism that you've shown me tonight. And this event has been enhanced by the being here, and we appreciate it. Would you join me in a round of applause?
So just because Mr. Murdock said he doesn't produce 4-pound books anymore, when you put 5 of them together, it's about 12. So he still has to write more succinctly, apparently. But on behalf of the Graziadio Alumni Network, Pepperdine University, and even if Mr. Murdock doesn't mind me saying for Dole and the Four Seasons, I want to thank the panelists tonight and to thank all of you. I'd also like to thank Charlie Kearns for coming out here tonight and doing a stellar job of moderating for us. So a round of applause.